this is number 21, and what I did is that this is actually a really great position to be in. I square both sides first. The left-hand side, since we have two things multiplying exactly the same thing under the square roots, you just get the same thing without the square roots. The right-hand side, we need to write it like this so you can see that we're going to FOIL. In other words, we're going to distribute. So first thing we do is 1 times 1 right here. We do 1 times the square root of 6 minus x. We do the square root of 6 minus x times 1, which is also the same thing. And then we have square root of 6 minus x times the square root of 6 minus x, which is right here. So I'm just going to write my left-hand side the same because it's pretty much just waiting for the right-hand side to finish. So the right-hand side, 1 times 1 is equal to 1 plus. You can see here that I have two of the same things, so I'm going to tally it up. So it's going to be, instead of just 1, there's two of the same things. So there are two 6 minus x's. You can see here that two of the same square roots, they're exactly the same thing under the same square root. So it's just going to equal plus 6 minus x. So again, what I did is I did 1 times 1, which is equal to 1. I added these two terms together because they're exactly the same. So now there are two of them, two of the square root 6 minus x's. This one, there's two of the same things under the square root multiplying each other, and that just equals the same thing without the square root. Okay, so you could see here that there's a square root symbol here, and there's also all this stuff. So I actually want to move everything away from the square root. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the 1 to the left-hand side. So I'm going to move this 1 to this side. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. Then I'm also going to subtract 6 from both sides. And then I'm going to add x to both sides. Okay. So I'm basically moving this negative x to the left-hand side. I'm moving this 6 to the left-hand side. And I'm moving this 1 to the left-hand side. Okay. Moving everything to the left. I get 2 square root of 6 minus x is equal to negative 6 minus 4x. Okay, so this should look almost exactly like the problems that we started with at the very beginning, right? Where there was a square root equal to a number, but you can see here that there's actually a number in front of the square root. It's a number in front of the square root. So the first thing that we want to do, thank you. Yeah, tomorrow. The first thing that we want to do is we want to actually make it easier on ourselves. So if there's ever a number in front of the square root and both numbers on the other side are divisible, you can divide everything by that number. So what I mean is you can divide everything by 2 to just make it easier on yourself. So you get negative 3 minus 2x is equal to the square root of 6 minus x. So again, the reason I divided everything by 2 is because everything on the left-hand side, the 6 and the 4, are divisible by 2, and this right-hand side is also divisible by 2. So all I'm doing is just to make the numbers smaller. Okay, so now that we're at this point, this is exactly like the problems we started with in the very beginning. So all we have to do is square both sides. Again, okay? This is the second time we're going to square both sides. So this, again, if we have two of the same things multiplying each other, it's very easy. It's just 6 minus x. The left-hand side is where we have more of our problem here, so I'm going to just rewrite it so you can see what I'm doing. So it's negative 3 minus 2x times negative 3 minus 2x. Okay, so just like what we did before, we're going to FOIL and distribute. So I would say these problems are not too complicated. There's a lot of steps. Okay. So here you do negative 3 times negative 3, which is, well, we'll talk about that soon. We have negative 3 times negative 2x. A negative times a negative is a positive, so we have plus 3 times 2x. We have negative 2x times negative 3. Again, a negative times a negative is a positive, so 2x times 3. And then a negative 2x times a negative 2x. Again, a negative times a negative is a positive, and this equals 6 minus x. Okay, we're almost there. So then we just multiply. Negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. We have plus. I'm going to actually skip a step here. So this is 6x, or I could just show you. This is 6x plus 6x plus 4x squared is equal to 6 minus x. So just like before, if you ever see an x by itself, you see a number by itself, and you see an x squared, what we should do is we should try moving everything to one side so it equals to 0. Okay? We should try to move everything to one side so it equals 0. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 6. I'm going to add x to both sides. So I'm just going to rewrite this so you can see what's going on here. Okay, so I'm going to move the 6 to the left-hand side. I'm going to move the x to the left-hand side. And I'm going to reorder this just by greatest exponent. Okay, we're in the final stretches here. Okay, so does anyone know what we do now? That's right. Kiara?
Quadratic formula.
You could use quadratic, that's totally fine. That's one way. You could use factoring, that's the other way. So here my preferred method is actually to factor it. This is something that's actually easily factorable if you're really good with factoring. But for those that are not, I would recommend quadratic, which is a end all be all. But if you don't remember the formula, then I'm going to show you how to factor either by grouping or factor by the Xbox method. So you need a refresher on that. That's what we're going to do right now. Okay, so if we do the factoring here, if I draw an x here, just as a reminder that this is a little bit different because there is a 4 in front of the x squared. So anytime there's a number greater than 1 in front of x squared, you have to do a times c, which on top, which is 12, and then we have 13 on the bottom. So you just want to think about what two numbers when multiplied equals the top, but when added together equals the bottom. It should be a pretty straightforward number here. Kiara?
1 and 12.
1 and 12, that is correct. So normally you would just write x plus 12 times x plus 1. However, you have to stop here because there is a 4 here, so we have to move either to the box method or factor by grouping. So the first method I'm going to review is factor by grouping. So this 12 and this 1 are the 13x split up. So it's going to turn into 4x squared plus 12x plus x plus 3 is equal to 0. So if you don't remember this method, that's okay. You can tune out if you want, but this is one of two methods which you can use. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the greatest common factor between the first two terms. And a very big clue is that the second term, the greatest common factor between the two is 1. So that means that I'm going to change these two so that it's going to be x plus 3. So the greatest common factor here is 4x. So it's going to be 4x times x plus 3 plus 1 times x plus 3 equals 0. And then now I'm going to take the greatest common factor of both again, and that would be 4x and plus 1 have x plus 3 in common. And so you can see here that what I did is I actually factored it, and so now I have my factors. I can go ahead and solve, and I get my answers. Okay, so this is method 1. This is called factor by grouping, if you forgot. Okay, so let's go ahead and do factor by the x box. Does anyone still need this? I actually think that so factor by the Xbox method is actually essentially this same method, but it's just a little bit more organized. Okay, so if we were to factor by the Xbox method, then you can see here, let's move this up. Let's do 12, 1, 13, 4x squared, x plus 3 equals 0. This is where we left off. Okay, there we go. Sure. What you would do is you would draw a box. That's why it's called the x and then the box method. So the first thing you would do is in the top left, you would put 4x squared. You can always put the x squared on the top left. And then you're going to put the constant always on the bottom. These two are going to be filled by either the 12 or the 1. And so it doesn't actually matter which one you put it in. So we're going to put 12x here and the x. Again, we're going to put them as the versions of x there. Okay, so this one is a little more straightforward because you want to think about, this one could be x. One of them is going to be either, 2x or 4x. You can see here that x times a number equals x. Well, that's pretty straightforward. That should just be, either 1 or 3, but 3 doesn't make sense. So no, this one is 1. Right, so 1 times what number equals 3? Well, 1 times 3 is equal to 3. And it looks like we're almost done here. Well, what number times 3 is equal to 12x? Well, 4x. And you can see here 4x times x equals 4x squared. X times 1 equals x. 4x times 3 equals 12x. 1 times 3 equals 3. And so you can see that I have factored successfully 4x plus 1 times x plus 3 equals 0. Okay, so remember that, after we factor, we still have to solve for it, right? We still have to solve for x. Okay. So 4x plus 1, I know some of you guys can do this easily in your head. So what you would do is you subtract 1 from both sides. You get 4x is equal to negative 1. Divide by 4 on both sides. X is equal to negative 1/4. And this one, you subtract 3 from both sides. You get x is equal to negative 3. Okay, so you might think you're done right now. You're not. The last thing we need to do is check your answers. The very last thing you need to do is check your answers. Okay.
This is like a 10, 12-minute problem.
13.
13, okay. And now we need to check our answers?
Yep.
Why don't we just keep
Wow, I'm pretty sure that's the right answer. No.
Okay, so this, all you have to do is plug it in, right? So all you do is you do 7 times negative 1/4 minus 3 is equal to negative, oh wait, sorry, this is wrong. Sorry, these numbers are a lot easier. 1 minus 5x equals 1 plus 6 minus x. And then you're going to plug in negative 1/4, so 1 minus 5 times negative 1/4 is equal to 1 plus 6, and this is minus 1/4. So you have here 1 plus 5/4 is equal to 1 plus 6 plus 1/4. Okay, so to make sure that I'm combining the same values, I'm going to just convert 1 to 4 over 4. So I'm going to convert this to 4 over 4 plus 5 over 4. And this one I'm just going to convert to 24 over 4 plus 1 4. So again, all I'm doing is changing it to its equal value. Then we have 9 over 4. The square root of 9 over 4 is equal to 1 plus 25 over 4. Okay, so taking the square root of a fraction might seem kind of insane. But here, the square roots, you could just take them individually, the top and the bottom, and then that would be your answer. So the square root of 9 over 4 is the square root of 9 over the square root of 4. Right, 3 divided by 2. Right. The square root of 9, I think most of you know, is just 3, so this would be equal to 3. And then the square root of 4 is just 2. Same thing for the right-hand side. It looks really complicated while there's a fraction, but a square root of 25 is just 5, so 5. And then the square root of 4 is just 2. I will convert this right here. So we equal to each other. And what you can see here is that negative 1/4 is not an answer. Negative 1/4 is not an answer. Okay, we're almost done. We checked one answer. The other one's easier, right? It's just negative 3. So this one, we plug it into 1 minus 5 negative 3 equals 1 plus the square root of 6 minus negative 3. Okay, so 1 plus 15 is equal to 1 plus 9. So is the square root of 16 equal to 1 plus 3? Is 4 equal to 4? I would like to think so. And so our answer here is only x is equal to negative 3. Our answer is only x is equal to negative 3. And that's it. So again, I will say that this problem is not difficult in the sense that you think where this is confusing. There is a very straightforward method to do this. There are just a lot of steps, and it may seem very overwhelming, but you guys know how to do each one of these steps. Okay, so just take it part by part. Essentially, it's part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4, and that's it. And part 1 and part 2 are essentially the same thing. You just kind of repeat the steps again. You do it twice. The third part is just factoring. You just have to remember to factor. The last part is just checking your answers, and that's it. So when you think about it, it's pretty straightforward in terms of instruction. You just keep squaring both sides, you simplify, you square both sides, you simplify, and that's already step 1 and 2. Step 3, you just have to see, how do I factor this? Can I use quadratic? Can I use factoring? And then after that, you just check your answers. That's it. So all you have to do, again, the instructions are not too difficult, but it is a lot of steps, and that's the hard part. Okay. Are there any questions about this?